it's getting better every day, but it's probably not perfect right now. And I've sort of had some results where I've scratched my head and said, this doesn't feel right.
Why
Let me
is
do a
this
little
here?
more. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything seems to be going well.
Excellent. Okay, so if you're just joining us, we're sitting here with Cosmo, who is joining Touchstone Talks today to talk about his experience exiting 4L Promos. He's a client with Touchstone, and we worked with him to find a partnership to take his business to the next level and let him head off to retirement.
I still hate that word.
So I heard a great word, and you tell me if you like this one better.
Okay, thank you.
It's called pre-tirement.
Okay, that sounds
So
a little younger.
It does. The idea is that it's not sitting on your couch all day.
Yeah.
It's before that.
Yeah.
It's the what did I not get to do that I want to do now.
I like that a lot better. And that was one of my concerns. Like once we were going to be free to do whatever we wanted every day, and the first week or two, I'll tell anyone, is just chaotic. You're nervous, you don't know what to do, so just go with it and stay busy. But eventually the dust settles and you kind of find a rhythm. And it's a different rhythm than working every day, but you find what that rhythm needs to be. And I agree, you need to have stuff to do because it can't just be getting up, doing exercises, and then maybe reading a book. And I sort of made a point not to read too many books because I could go 3 or 4 hours a day with the book in my hand and sitting on a couch. So, I've tried not to do that, at least not during the day, maybe at night.
Okay. That's a good goal.
But pre-retirement, I like that.
I was sitting at a showcase and there was a panel, and the gentleman that was speaking was a retirement coach. And he goes, I don't like the word retirement. And I'm like, I don't like the word retirement either.
Sounds so final.
Right?
There's nothing after that.
Right. Well, I think about, long walks on the beach and twiddling your thumbs, right? Like that's
you only walk on the beach so many times before it gets repetitive.
Exactly.
And I think volunteering is a big part of it, and spending time with your family and traveling. Those are all the kind of things that we've tried to do as we have more free time.
Yeah, I get that. That. The panelists that were there, one of them was in divinity school.
Oh, wow.
And one of them had started a nonprofit, and one of them had written 3 books. So considerations for other ways to include books. I was like, that is not my definition. That is a more realistic view on what would likely happen if I were to exit my job.
I don't think you'd want to read any books that I write. I'm not a writer. That's not a skill set I have. My wife is terrific at it, but for me, I always sort of joke, mine would be more all bullet points. Very clear, very concise, but very boring.
Technical writing is an entire field, honestly.
Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
So if you ever get really bored, you can go write some instruction manuals.
There you go. I'll put that on my list.
But it's good to have a list.
Yeah.
So that's I guess is important. If you only honestly took a couple weeks to get a new rhythm, I think you did it quite well.
Yeah, maybe it's more like a month or two. I think I always tell this story. I think a week or two after we sold and the dust had kind of started to settle and we weren't going into the office that much is when I sort of would come down and say, okay, what am I going to do today? And so I needed to fill my day. So my wife has a theater production company, and she had a website that's been sitting there for 10 years. And I said, oh, it's time to give her a new website. So I spent the next probably month working on a new website, including some video from past performances. And every day I'd go down there like a job.
Yeah.
And then once I got that out of my system, I could sort of let go and sort of, do what I really wanted to do.
That was your pre-retirement.
Yeah, that's right. That was
check the box.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. Well, let's rewind time a little bit. A lot of our viewers are going to be business owners who are going to be in the same spot that you were, worried about what does retirement look like, but still going, okay, well, but maybe I do want to exit. So what made you decide it was time to exit?
So I think it's a process. I don't think it's any one data point. And I own 4R Promos with a partner, Tim Raymond.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim had a clearer mind about wanting to retire. And I teased him a lot about it ahead of it, teased him after it.
Well, we teased him during it.
And we teased him during it, exactly. But it was helpful for me because I think I needed that little nudge to know that it was time. And we started it early, as you may recall, pre-COVID.
Right.
Where we had initial conversations with you and Jeff Rich. And once COVID hit, we had to sort of put it on the back burner, right? And so I had a lot of time to sort of process it. And I think for me, along with Tim's help, I came to the realization that there's certainly a lot of growth left in 4R Promos, but I didn't have the fire in the belly, as they used to say, to want to bring it there. And once I realized that, I knew it was in the best interest of everybody to step aside and have someone else do it. And so a year and a half later, sitting here, it's very clear to me, going through it, it's not at all. It's fuzzy.
Okay.
You have days where you're second guessing, days where you want to backtrack. But I think overall, the fact that I knew I didn't have the same desire that I had 10 years earlier sort of made it clear that, I had to step aside. And that was a good thing. It wasn't a sad thing.
Well, and you guys bought the company, which is something else that, we work with people on. That's kind of an unusual situation. How did that process?
So that was probably close to 20 years ago now.
Right.
When we found ourselves wanting to run another business, and we stumbled upon the e-commerce sector. And so that's probably 2004, 2005. Still relatively new. I mean, Google was still Google, but it's not the Google that it is today. And so we kept looking for e-commerce companies, and we eventually stumbled on one within the promotional products industry. We knew nothing about the promotional products industry, but we liked e-commerce. And so we bought a small, we sort of say a shell of a company. It wasn't named 4R Promos. It had a website that was very clunky, and we really got into the innards of it. It really wasn't e-commerce. But that was okay with us because it gave us the framework. It gave us the network of suppliers, and we immediately got introduced into the industry that probably would have taken a couple of years for us to figure out on our own. And then within about a year, we launched 4R Promos and started on pay-per-click, and that's another sort of story that was somewhat random, not planned out, but was
pay-per-click was random
for us.
Really,
we started 4R Promos thinking that we were going to have a catalog, a full 20-page catalog, and do direct mail.
Okay.
And so we were working on developing the catalog at the same time that we started pay-per-click, because we were certainly aware of it. And over time, and not a long period of time, maybe a couple of months, we realized the economics of pay-per-click were so much better than catalog mailings.
Printing,
the postage, the response rates, the lack of control. So we never even got the first catalog off the ground. We just shelved it, and we went entirely on pay-per-click. And I can remember the first month where it was all in on pay-per-click. I forget exactly. I do know how much we spent, but the results were disastrous. I mean, it was just awful.
Oh, no.
But we learned, right?
Okay.
So through trial and error, as the months unfolded, we got smarter and better, and we just stuck to it, and I think that's, for me, I think if I give anyone any advice, if you're starting a company or if you're in an entrepreneurial situation, just never give up. Just keep, don't listen to other people. If you think you're right, make your changes, but just keep at it. Just never give up.
That's excellent.
Yeah. So that's how it started. And we had a lot of input, both requested and not requested, from different folks. In the industry 20 years ago, there was a lot of talk about the e-commerce companies, of which we were one, just not sustainable. The industry thought
Not sustainable.
because the industry, some folks within the industry 20 years ago thought that you had to meet with your customers face to face. You had to show them the merchandise and
touch and feel,
and the e-commerce sector was just never going to be successful. We said, okay, but we stayed on our way. We didn't let that bother us. And then once we got our feet on the ground and we saw some success, we heard from everyone in the e-commerce space, don't build your company just on pay-per-click. Build it on multiple factors. It makes perfect sense, right? From the outside in.
Right. Diversification. It's everybody's right. Everybody wants you to diversify.
And ultimately we got there, but we took a lot longer than I think anyone would have recommended we take, because we were in complete control of pay-per-click. We could decide how much to spend, and we got results every day, and we were able to react on those results. And for us in those early days where cash wasn't in abundance, we had to be sure that whatever we were going to invest in, we needed the payback. And when we looked at organic traffic, it's a much more long-term view. And so we didn't have the luxury of that long-term view.
You need somebody ready to buy.
Yes, exactly. So initially we stuck with pay-per-click. We did not diversify. But then over the years, we did stuff.
Well, I remember we'd already started talking when you started doing the email.
Email marketing.
Yeah, email marketing. That was relatively new, and you were talking to new companies, and that was, which I guess is kind of an important thing to think about, that I don't know that all of our owners think about, right? Even though you're planning to sell, it doesn't mean you stop growing, right? Like,
oh, absolutely.
You can't just, I'm going to sell now, so now I can, not worry about this anymore.
Just the opposite.
Correct.
We felt when Tim and I would be sitting there in the middle of all this, and knowing that, the year before we went out into the market was the year everyone was going to look at, and suddenly Tim and I looked at each other and we said, for 15 years, we didn't worry about it as much as we're worrying about it now.
Yeah.
Because if we missed, it was just Tim and I missing, and we said, okay, we'll do better next year. But now it was important to us.
Yeah.
And so, yes, no, absolutely. I think, unfortunately, it's going to be the most stressful as you go, just before you go and bring it to market. I mean, that's just
absolutely. Every month, where's your TTM?
Yeah.
What's TTM now? What's your TTM forecast?
Yeah. What's your view of it? Oh my goodness! And then you worry. At least we did. We were very conscious of what we said, because we didn't want to overpromise, and we didn't want to. We wanted to be as realistic as possible without hurting ourselves. And so that was quite the balance.
It is a balance.
To sort of think through. And as you may recall, we were going through tremendous growth in that year leading up to selling, which was great on the front end, but we had a lot of operational concerns.
Right.
We couldn't handle all the orders coming in, and then we couldn't get back to the customers. Something that was always so important to us was making sure the customer was happy and that they got answers right away. Suddenly we were in this situation where we couldn't sustain the customer levels that we wanted to. And so that bothered us, but that was a reality, and we owned up to it. I mean, we were in talks.
It was a bubble, and we had part of diligence is they review everything. So they were on your Google reviews, and they were why is this review say this? What happened here?
Right. And so we were just open about it.
Yep.
This is the way it is. And so, in some respects, it was an opportunity because they could do a lot better in the subsequent year or two, and so, unfortunately, I wish I could say it's an easy. You made it as easy as possible, but it's a stressful process.
It is a stressful process, but so is operating the company.
Yes.
Right? Like entrepreneurship doesn't come without stress. So people that have started and operated a business, I think, are a very precise human being.
And persistent.
Yes.
I do think that's a key. And in the early years, it was extremely stressful because one mistake could be the end of the company.
Right.
And Tim and I realized that, and we didn't always. We tried to shelter the employees from it because that wasn't their problem. Their problem was to do their job. It was our problem to make sure that
You could
we
pay
lived
them
for another day, right?
You
to
could
pay them.
to do their job. Yep.
And it was years later, before we sold, that one of the employees who's been with us for almost from the beginning said to me, "Wow, you're more easygoing than you were a few years ago." And then I could say, "Well, yeah, because I was worried that we weren't going to be surviving." And so it was nice to hear that at least I wasn't as stressed as I was in the early years, and they sort of perceived that. But it was important to Tim and I that we didn't share all the what ifs with the staff, because it's not their problem.
No,
that was our problem.
And that's a good attitude.
Yeah,
and creates a healthy work environment.
It
which
does.
You guys were very focused on. Like, your employees were so important to you.
We always said we all needed a job. We all needed to work, but we can try to make it as pleasant as possible. There are some days where it was stressful for everybody. We couldn't avoid that, especially when things got really busy and there were backlogs. But generally we tried to treat them the way we treated everyone and the way they wanted to be treated. And so, we ran a flat organization, right? We didn't have a whole bunch of layers. We didn't have a whole bunch of titles. And that was by design. We just wanted we wanted to empower everyone to be able to do their job so that they didn't need to come to somebody else to get directions or feedback. And that worked great for us. But when we were close to 50 employees towards the end, we realized it was time to create an organization.
Some structure.
And that was another reason that we knew that it was time, because we had left the big corporate world decades earlier, and so we didn't want to go back to an organization that was structured like that. But it was needed, and I know since the acquisition, more of an organization is in place, and it's appropriate if it's needed
to grow to the size that they're projecting to grow now.
Yes,
there's got to be a hierarchy. Everybody cannot come to Cosmo.
No, and you could probably have, the last year that we were there, we probably needed a little bit more organization than we had. But
people get comfortable with what they are in, and change is not easy. And if we were pushing you out of your comfort to exit, then pushing you into a structure at the same time could disrupt everything.
Right. Right, because we did actually.
We talked about
have that
right?
conversation.
Should we be looking at a GM? Should we get a management level in here?
And should we promote people to create an organization? And we all sort of collectively agreed that it would be too artificial. It would be too forced, and so.
Well, I don't think you had the right people.
That
wanted that.
Yes. Yes.
And that's kind of an important decision. You can't just I promote you and expect them to achieve.
Well, I promote you, but I don't really want to be the person, training you or telling you what this new thing looks. So it's a fail for both of us.
Correct.
And we didn't want to set anyone up for that. So I'm glad that we didn't do that. It was an easy decision. I mean, you guys were right there with us as we were having those conversations, that it just didn't make sense to do anything other than what we had done for the previous.
And there are plenty of owners that we work with that were like, he's actually mostly in charge already. We could change his title, and his optics are mostly that title anyway.
Yeah.
But that just wasn't the case with you guys. You didn't have that.
No, we had strong people in each of the functions. We didn't have a general manager type, and so and that was clear.
It was
clear to the organization, I think, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But the exit has been good for the employees as well, right?
It has, and we touch base with them occasionally. And a year and a half later, everyone that I've talked to, and the sense that I get is that they're happy. They continue to be treated fairly, and they're given opportunities as the organization grows. there is opportunity for them. And that's one of the things that we talked about with the employees once it was widely known in the weeks leading up to the transaction, that it would be different, but there'd be opportunity. And that's one of the positives that could come out of it. And it did. So that I know that makes Tim and I very happy that it's worked out the way that it did.
Good. And we see often what happened with you guys. You guys were both given a board seat for the growth. So what does that involvement look like? I mean, it's obviously not filling your day-to-day.
No.
That's not the goal.
No. Our involvement now is solely as an investor, as a minority investor. And we do attend the quarterly board meetings, and it's nice to get the information and see where things are going. And occasionally, maybe there's a question or two that Catherine or Patrick might reach out to get a quick answer. But other than that, that's our involvement. And it's nice to see that it's continuing to grow, right? From having created 4L Promos now almost 20 years ago to it being one of the top distributors in the industry, it makes us proud.
Absolutely. When you have your commercial running next to 4 Imprints, you'll be able to say, I did that, at least at the beginning.
Yeah, we came up with that name. So, so it is.
Excellent. Excellent.
But the, the organization now is thriving. It's got good management team. Patrick at the helm is doing a terrific job. Catherine, who you met, brought in from Hadley, is exactly the right person that should be there. So
good.
And the employees are echoing that.
Good. Yeah. Well, and we thought that was very important when we met her. And we met her during the diligence process, which is a big help. Doesn't always happen, but happens often that you want to meet the kind of the person that's going to take over in advance.
And I think we picked up on it right away that she had that right balance, and she certainly knew what she was doing and was very competent, but she had compassion. And I think that's part of the equation in terms of moving forward. How do you in treating employees, we talked about earlier, having compassion, understanding empathy, understanding where their head is at and what they're going through, and accommodating that to the extent that you can.
Yeah. What was the worst thing about diligence? And you can't say me.
No, I won't say that. There got to a point where there were so many documents and then versions of documents that we couldn't keep some of it straight in terms of, were we looking at the latest version, or is there a version after it that we should be answering? Just the volume of data that got transferred for a company that didn't have a lot of organization in terms of the structure, and we weren't really big on holding board meetings or having minutes or having documentation. We certainly created a ton of it in due diligence, and the questions just kept on coming. I mean, they just didn't stop. Good questions, necessary questions, but they just kept coming. And then at the towards the end, when we thought we were done, only come to realize, we had to do the whole technical review, which sort of took us by surprise. Understand why they're doing it. No complaints there, but you mentally you'd said, okay, we're done with diligence, and we weren't.
Surprised you're not.
So I think that was, maybe as we talked through it, that was one that was disappointing in the moment, but we did it and it was fine. But
it was actually fairly painless as technical goes. We've had worse.
I'm sure, and I think the person on their end, Jake, did a good job. Again, he did. He was professional, and to the extent he could be compassionate, he was. I mean, he understood, all the dynamics, and so.
Well, diligence gets tricky. How much to say when? How much to show now? What puts you at danger for overexposure? And it's good to kind of increase that gradually. But
I think that's right. And that's probably very good advice, because you have to get to know each other, one, and while and I don't think Hadley ever did this during the process. You don't want to hold back too much or hold back the
Right.
significant things that you're thinking of, and they certainly didn't do that.
No.
I think they were very open, but I could see, doing it in steps,
Right.
right? Because it'd become overwhelming if it happened all at once.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
A floodgate.
yeah, yeah, and so that's probably good advice. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we're about done. So I have one signature question for you. If you had not done e-commerce and you had not done 4All Promo, and certainly you had plenty of options because you're a traditional finance bro from back in the day. So what else would you have done?
So, my knee-jerk answer, and I guess I can't give. When I was 12 years old, I wanted to be a professional basketball player. But I was too short, too slow, and not coordinated enough. So I gave up on that early on. But we always had parties at 4All Promo. It's sort of summer picnics and whatever. And there was one, and we always played trivia games where we made up the questions. And there was this one time many years ago where the employees asked Tim and I a question. And one of the questions was, if you weren't in your position here at 4All Promos, what position would you want to be? And so my answer was obvious. I said, I'd want to be a graphic artist. And I say that because I'm always in awe of anyone who can draw a beautiful picture, sing a beautiful song, act, any kind of artistic flair. To me is because I'm so far from it. I have no ability to do it at all, but I'm always in awe of it. So if I come back again, I'd want to have some artistic flair.
Okay. So website design is actually a good hobby.
Yeah.
Then
Right.
That's why the theater.
Exactly. It's sort of, I
Website is good.
get close enough to it without doing any damage.
Yeah. Not artistic myself,
Yeah.
so I understand the appreciation. But
Yeah. So I think that's my answer.
good. That's an excellent answer. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, and it's always great to catch up.
Yeah.
And
Well, thank you. I always enjoy talking to you. So thank you very much.
you're welcome. You're welcome.